Welcome to Solutions, where listening will leave you inspired by solutions to issues you or others you know may be struggling with in the public education system today. I am Olivia Wall, and I am honored to welcome my guest today, Ellen Oliver Keene. Let me tell you a little bit about Ellen. Ellen works with schools and districts throughout the country and abroad. For 16 years, she directed staff development initiatives at the Denver based Public Education and Business Coalition, also known as PEBC. She served as deputy director and director of literacy and staff development for the Cornerstone Project at the University of Pennsylvania for 4 years. Ellen also serves as senior advisor at Heinemann, overseeing the Heinemann Fellows Initiative, and is the editor of the Heinemann Journal. Ellen has published many wonderful professional learning books that line my bookshelf. I promise to link in the show notes, and we will be discussing her most recent book I have sitting right here next to me, The Literacy Studio. It is amazing, and I can't wait for you to learn more about it. Ellen, I am thrilled to welcome you as a guest on
Oh, thank you,
Solutions.
Olivia. I'm delighted to be with you.
It's
I've really been looking forward to
I
this,
have
so
as well.
thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I love to start every episode by asking my guest who an inspiring educator is from their life. Would you share with listeners?
This has been, it really sparked some thinking for me, Olivia, when you forwarded that question. There have been so many that I can't even begin to narrow it down, but to go back to my undergraduate, I mean, in, 1903 or whenever that was, a long, long time ago, my first ed psych professor, who was a professor named Joel Mott. He's written some extraordinary books, and his affect as it is related to kids who in some way or another
Yeah.
struggle, was absolutely seminal in my education life. He was just vociferously against labels and a deficit model and a sort of medical model for identifying kids, for this and this program. And he was just very, very influential in terms of how I shaped my outlook toward
Mm.
children, and and the sort of vigilance that he instilled in me about not looking at kids through a lens of liability, but rather one of
Ah,
assets. And that has stuck with me in a very profound way. So
yes.
goes back a while.
Yes. Well, I think educators that leave us with that message of children being pro kid, that asset based thinking of what does every child have to bring to the table because they all do, that sticks
Yeah.
with us forever.
It
Yeah.
does, and it's been, it just is influential today as it was, in 1903
It is
when
indeed.
I was an
It is
undergraduate.
indeed. And I have to think of NCTE. It was my 17th wedding anniversary, and I chose to spend it with
You
you. My lovely husband is a dream. He
Oh,
said, go to Baltimore. And I remember sitting in your session, and it was the Literacy Studio. I thought, what's this all about?
yep,
And
yep.
I left that session. My mind was blown because it makes so much stinking sense. And I thought, how have I not been living with this my whole life? And so I'm excited for listeners to learn all about the Literacy Studio from you. And every episode, I feel I see issues all over the nation, all over the world. And I love to seek out guests that are problem solvers. And you call out an issue that is prevalent everywhere. So I'm going to read directly from your book. It's on page 6. The fact is that we have separated reading and writing instruction to a greater or lesser degree, and it is past time to rethink it. We can do better for students, and we can regain control over the tyranny of the clock at the same time. There are never enough minutes. We know that. And I know so many adults, so many educators I speak with are frustrated there's not enough time for independent reading and writing. Choice is always a challenge, and
Mhm.
getting enough time to confer. These are all frustrations, right?
Exactly. Yep,
The
yep.
Literacy Studio addresses all of these. So,
Mhm.
before we jump
Yeah.
in, I'd love for you to give a brief history around reading and writing workshops for listeners that may not be familiar with that
Yeah.
construct.
Absolutely, and I'll try to do it briefly because it's an extraordinary history that dates back to the mid to late 1970s in this country and really had its genesis with Dr. Donald Graves, who was then at the University of New Hampshire and who undertook a study, interestingly, through the National Institutes of
Mm,
Health about students' well being and ended up really looking at early writing and what would happen if we gave kids time to write independently, as you were been talking about, choice in terms of what they write about, so no more prompts, and some kind of a response through conferences, through peer response, and so on. And that theory that emerged from that study, which I think was completed in 1980, 81, was absolutely the foundation for all of the work that has come from it, that is developed around workshop. Literacy Studio is absolutely based in that in that work. And Don Graves, I was lucky enough to have him in my classroom when I was teaching, and it was pretty amazing. And I was pretty starstruck and really, really scared, but it was just incredible to watch him interact with my kids and some things that I felt that I needed to control as a teacher, he handed over to them, and that opened up worlds for me. And pretty soon, I was teaching writing that way, but I was still teaching reading the old way, and it didn't make any sense. And they were bifurcated, they were completely separate. There wasn't enough time. And so, Readers and Writers Workshop really did evolve from that early work of Don Graves and many, many others who have developed theory around it, who have continued research around it, and who have written very, very brilliantly about it. It would take me years to name them all, but I stand on all of those shoulders, really, to the time that I was in my classroom.
I also appreciate in the book how you articulate this is what is still powerful through
Yes.
reading and writing
Yeah.
workshop that we
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
need to hold on to. Um, and
Yeah.
so you mentioned a few things just now: time, choice, and time to write voluminously, time to read voluminously.
Yes.
Um, and I
Yes.
want to just speak to the idea of choice because it's not just
Mm.
choosing books. It's not just choosing what we're going to write about content wise. It's
Yeah.
also making the choice. And this was, I thought, oh my goodness, it's making the choice of when I'm going to read, when I am going to
Exactly.
write, right?
That's my little spin on
It's
it.
it's
Yeah.
brilliant.
That's my spin
It's
on it.
brilliant.
Yeah.
So, again, before we jump into what the Literacy Studio is, I have a question for you because I am a teacher and I grew up in the world of gradual release, of balanced literacy, and for almost 25 years now, that has been my world. And we're at this precipice of where, if you say
Yeah.
balanced literacy, people almost shut you off
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
There's not discourse. It's just this ready to
Yeah.
debate.
Yeah.
And I'm really torn because I know in my world as a teacher, independent writing, I before I ever launched that with kids,
Huge.
right? It's huge. I also believe strongly in interactive writing. Right, the
Absolutely.
idea of
Of course.
co-constructing messages with children, shared writing. So
Right.
some of these structures that live with balanced literacy. Ellen, what would you say to me, to other teachers that feel torn right now in the world of education and would love to shift to
I
Lit
yeah.
Studio?
Yeah, I understand completely. And of course, that would be, a couple of hours in and of
Yeah.
itself as a discussion for us. But I have taken a deep dive in the last couple of years into the so called science of reading. And I think I feel like I understand now where this is coming from and what some of the really profound misconceptions are related to cueing systems, balanced literacy, comprehension
Yes.
strategies, things that that we have long known to be highly effective with kids are now being questioned. And I think the answer is challenging, Olivia, because as a teacher, I did not have time to study the research. That was not on my front burner, I can tell you. I was up all night anyway,
Yes.
just trying to stay ready for the next
Yes.
day. The answer, though, is for us now in the research. We have very, very complete, multi-layered decades of research that suggest that the elements that I just talked to you about, time, ownership, responsibility, community, all of those kinds of things, are absolutely supported in the research. So, what I think is challenging for teachers is that you don't have time to read and dig into all of that stuff. That's my job. I have to know in order to, to advise in
Mhm.
any kind of credible way what the research really says. And the issue, I think, is that some who are advocating a turn away from balanced literacy and workshop and all of its incarnations, some who are advocating for that are reading a very, very narrow
Yes.
slice of research. Very, very narrow. So, I go back to my own classroom, and this is many years ago. I was absolutely teaching with a workshop model, and watching as the research evolved. That was in the early and to mid 80s, Olivia. So we've had this data for years and
Yes.
years and years, and it's been corroborated over and over and over again. So it is a really challenging time to be a teacher, and some of the state policies are very regressive. But I want teachers to know that they stand on very, very solid research when they're teaching in a workshop model. That has been ignored in some quarters, and we're sort of only paying attention to certain kinds of research. We've got to look at the whole
Yeah.
picture. And, I am delighted for any of your listeners to kind of follow up with that, to provide some of the studies that, might be helpful to read and kind of inform ourselves as a response to people who are pushing on
Yeah.
us. But it's very difficult when you don't have the time to really dig into that. So,
You're walking in my mind because I'm thinking of revamping my website. And the one piece that I think would be extraordinarily helpful for anyone going there would be nuggets of research alongside
yep,
each of these structures. So
yep.
you're just
And it's
validating.
out
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, it's just being ignored right now, and I think and it's not just that it's all '80s and '90s research, it's
Oh, yeah.
current research as well. So it really is a very robust body of research. I have some optimism.
Mhm.
Right now, I may be the incurable optimist, Olivia, but I do see some pushback here from very, very well known researchers, very, very knowledgeable, intelligent folks who are really starting to push back into this a little bit. So I'm hoping.
I'm hopeful
I'm
as
really
well.
hoping.
I'm hopeful as well.
Yeah.
It's been rough. So let's talk hope. Let's talk inspiration. The Literacy
Yeah.
Studio. Can you describe it in a nutshell for listeners and then break down the idea of crafting, composing, invitational groups, and
Yep.
reflecting sessions? Let's talk.
Okay, I'll try to do it in a nugget. This idea really came from my own classroom, Olivia. I was so frustrated
Mhm.
with the lack of time, and I was having too many lessons a day, separate, and then all the transitions, setting them back, like, just get reading, and then it's time to get ready. It was not working for me, and I was too young and dumb. I came home on, I guess this was my second or third year of teaching. I was home for spring break. I was going to ski the whole of spring break. There was no snow that year, and so I sat at my kitchen table in my little teacher's apartment that I was in at that time and revamped the whole thing. And I took it back to the kids. I actually reached out to a couple of colleagues and I said, "Do you want to try this?" And they're like, "Nope, no, we do not." Especially at this point of the year, we just tried to get
Yeah.
through. So I was just too dumb to know that, I was reinventing the whole wheel. So I went back, I said to my kids, "This is what we're going to try. One lesson, one lesson with two different areas of focus, both reading and writing in that whole group lesson, followed by, and that's called a crafting session in the book. Oh, by the way, they named it that. My
Oh,
kids, these names go way, way back. Yeah. My kids named it crafting session because we were always talking about the
mm,
craft of a reader and the craft of a
yes,
writer, like art and craft. So they said, "Oh, it's crafting." Yeah, I'm just like,
it
"Yes, it
works.
is." Um, then we moved to independent work, and you mentioned earlier that kids, by and large, not 100% of the time, but mostly, get to choose whether to apply what they've learned in the crafting session as a reader or as a writer, or that they want to use that independent time, which my kids called
Mhm.
composing, which is what we used to call writing, independent writing time. We called it composing. So now they were like, "Miss Oliver, you told us that reading is composing meaning. So we just call it
Oh,
composing."
I
Brilliant,
love it.
brilliant. I was like,
Yep.
yeah, we're off. And but they can choose whether to read or write for a limited amount of time. They can't choose to read every day
Mhm.
into the future. If they read today, they're going to write tomorrow. It's a very simple mathematical equation. Sometimes kids make a shift in the middle of a day to try something different as a reader or as a writer, but it all focuses on that class
Yeah.
goal. And the class goal is a big important concept that, or a global question that kids are really trying to apply as both readers and
Yes.
writers. And then the last section, of course, is reflecting, which they didn't come up with. I came
Mhm.
up with that, but it's a time not necessarily at the end of every literacy studio. Could be in the middle. Could be at the very beginning. Um, but it's a time when we're thinking about the big global question that we're grappling with in whatever unit of study we're in, and sort of their progress
Mhm.
toward it during that particular day. So reflection takes many, many forms, which I list in the book. And it's just that's the time to kind of pin it together a little bit and say, how does this matter? How will this matter to you as a reader, writer, as a
Yeah.
person outside of the four walls of this classroom? And then the fourth component you mentioned are invitational groups. I made that one up, but if you're invited to a group, you're coming.
Yeah.
It's not you may not RSVP. No, there are no regrets here, right? So it's an opportunity to go
Yeah.
deeper in some way. So if kids are struggling with something that we've been talking about in a crafting session, and I've got 4 or 5 kids who are in that struggle, is it more time efficient to pull them together for an invitational group? Absolutely, rather than have 5 separate
Mhm.
conferences, and that those patterns started to emerge for me very early on. Actually, invitational groups weren't initiated until the second year when I was really working on this, and but when we brought them in, it was amazing because kids were like, "Oh no, I can't go with him. He's a better reader. He's at a higher
Ah,
level." Like, nope, nope, no more of this. I'm sorry, forgive me, but crazy leveling
yeah.
stuff as a way to form groups. I just don't believe in it. We form groups around shared
Needs.
needs. And we may have someone who's reading at a very, very advanced level for their age, and we may have someone who's struggling a bit more, and we bring them together because they have the same need and they mentor each other in these groups. So that's as quickly as I can do it. Those are the big 4 components of Literacy Studio.
It's just amazing. And I want to just pause with the idea of invitational small groups.
Yep,
Something I recently lived, I was running a learning lab for 2 days in a fifth grade classroom. And I know you also highlight the importance of clear learning targets for children,
yes.
connected to that bigger question that they're investigating,
Very
right?
definitely. Yeah,
And so I thought, fifth grade, I'm going to give them a week, if not 2 weeks worth of potential
absolutely.
targets that they're going to circle back to over and over and over.
Yep,
And then I remember there was this moment where they went off and I was just allowing myself to survey the room, take
yep.
stock, and I watched. And as part of the crafting, I had them identify targets that they felt comfy or they really
Beautiful,
wanted to zoom in
beautiful.
on that day.
Yeah,
And I took a moment and thought, I don't have distinct invitational groups planned. I just want to ask the kids, what do you
Yep.
think? And so I paused and said,
Yep.
right now, out of those of you that are choosing to focus on target one as a reader or writer, who would love some coaching? Nothing. So I go through,
Beautiful.
right? But then
And they opt in.
I
Yep.
got to one target and 5 children's hands went up. I said, "Welcome.
Exactly.
We are having a small group at the rug." They came
Yep.
and then they flew when they were ready, and some just needed to hear it
Beautiful.
again. So I think
Yep.
it's important to state for listeners, it's not this heavily planned group. It can be
No.
just in the moment where you're surveying and you're seeing kids like, "Ah,
Very much
let's
so.
get together."
Yep. Absolutely, and that's actually, I think, the most evolved use of invitational groups. For me, I started with, oh my gosh, I have this whatever curriculum objective or standard that I have to teach, and these kids aren't getting it. So I was very narrow in my thinking about it initially. So you guys come, and uh, but when they got there, I said, I didn't want it to feel stigmatized to be in a small group, of course. So I said, guess what, you guys? We have a problem, and invitational groups are for problem
Yeah.
solving. And so here's the problem that I see, the challenge that I see. And so our job as an invitational group is to figure out solutions to this challenge and then to teach other kids, because I don't know, they might not know. So we got to be there to teach them, and that is then flows into the reflections
Right.
part. And that, so I think what you're describing, Olivia, is a very evolved invitational group, and it can just start for teachers with a little bit of concern, perhaps, about some delay in applying
Yeah.
something that they're trying as readers or writers. Maybe they're very successful with it as readers, not so much with
Mm.
writers, or vice versa. So those are all the ways to use invitational groups, but they are not scheduled. They are not 10:05 every day. It's this group that's going to meet until 10:20. I mean, I just that is such a huge drain on our time. And what I hear from teachers mostly
Mhm.
is, I want to have more time to confer with my kids.
Yes.
Well, if we're boxed in to 3 groups a day, there's going to be no time to confer. So we're privileging conferring,
Mhm.
sorry, over the sort of small group rotation. So it's a pretty big step away from our current conception, I think, of small groups.
I think so too. And I think that what I also adore in the book is how you speak to conferring. Because if conferring is where we're going to put our weight to make sure every child feels like they are growing individually as a reader and writer,
Yes.
then we better take our notes and keep our
Mhm. Yeah,
records in a really strategic way, right?
absolutely.
Where we can
Yep,
find
yep.
patterns. I know years ago I started taking all of my conferring notes, reading and writing on in the same document. I used a plan book. I never used those
Yep,
two
I
plan
know.
books,
Well, we all
right?
did.
And I would divide each box in half. I usually had around 30 students, if not more. I
Yep.
kept every month the children in the same box so I could look at over the whole year how they're going.
Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are little tips and tricks, but
Yeah.
I think going back to your asset based model, you have to look at where is each child's strengths as a reader and writer with
Abs
literacy, right?
exactly.
And then if
Yeah.
you have those targets to circle back to, those can be also ideas for groups. So what do you recommend for conferring and record keeping with Literacy Studio?
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of things. I'll just cut to the chase and say I prefer for kids to design their own record keeping,
Ah.
and that can be with very young children. We just don't think to ask them. They have goals. We were working on something in a crafting session. That's a class goal. That's a goal that everybody has. So how are you going to, if you're in first grade, collect evidence of that
Mhm.
goal? And it could be in some kind of computer file. For younger kids, honestly, it's just a paper
Yeah.
file. They're collecting evidence that they've tried something as a writer. And the same thing with post-it notes
Mhm.
or drawings or whatever, that they're trying something as a reader. As kids get older, my kids did invent their own record keeping.
Amazing.
So mine was really linked with theirs. Here's what we came up with. This is so low tech. Are you ready?
I'm
This is
ready.
so low
I
tech.
love it.
It worked. It worked. I put boxes of like what are the like 5 by 7 little boxes in each group of desks with index cards in them, and the index cards had the names of the kids in the group, and they were just divided down the middle. And on the left column, just think of a T chart. On the left column of that card, it was the class goal. Kids wrote it in there. And I, and then I made notes about it. So when I came to confer, I just pull the kid's card. And then I'm building over time. So it was, how are they doing? What's present performance level with respect to that goal? And then it's a teaching point. And what was my teaching point that day? And then I just turn to them and say, what are you going to work on? What's your goal? Right. And because it might be a subset of what we're working on as a large group. Right. So let's say that we've been reading lots of picture books and sort of studying how authors develop their
Mhm.
leads in the beginning of picture books. Then how are you going to apply that as a reader? How are you going to apply that as a writer? So if the conferences are combined,
Yeah.
they're not a reading conference and a writing conference. If I come up to a child who's writing, I'm going to enter through writing. We're going to talk about what he or she is doing as a writer, but then I'm going to make that connection to reading,
Ah,
right? So instead of having reading conferences and writing conferences, which are incredibly time consuming, we're putting them together. So then on that card, the kids would write their goal. And really, I've seen kids as young as first grade do
mhm.
this. It really is, it's pretty simple. And then they would also write on this sort of right hand column, they would also write progress toward their goals, something they tried that day. And then they would also we flagged kids who wanted follow-up or needed help, just put a sticky note on the top of the box. So I took home the boxes and just, not all of them every night, because I would never do
Yeah.
that. I would do like one box a night, and I'd see which kids were flagging something that they wanted me to respond to, and that was it. So literally index cards. I'm kind of embarrassed to
Mhm.
even admit that, but you know what, it worked. It was so smooth. I don't
Mhm.
know. And most of the burden was on them. I taught 2nd through 7th grade at different times. And so that whole spectrum, it definitely can work in that grade level spectrum.
Yeah, and I think for younger children, even just using pictorial support, right, gives some
Absolutely.
options. And I love the idea of having them in charge of, what's the
Yep.
clarity around the teaching that I'm asking you to
Mhm.
try. And connecting reading and writing just makes so much sense,
It
right?
does.
It's
And save
streamlining.
so much
Yeah,
time.
saves so much time. And so I think of
Yes.
students with needs, I think of our bilingual learners,
Yep.
and we
Yep.
need to get cobwebs away that are totally unnecessary, right? And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that idea of
Well stated.
the
Yeah.
literacy studio is such a beautiful way to support diverse learners as well. And I think that has to
Very
be
much
said.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been my experience for sure. Most of my work now is in schools that serve, low income or marginalized populations, mostly in cities, but also some rural areas around the country, and so it's, people say, "Well, yeah, sure, they can do it with those, high performing kids."
No.
No, no, no. This book is dedicated to a school in Los Angeles. The teachers and children pictured on the cover are from this school, inner city Los Angeles. Lots and lots of English learners in this school, and just thriving with this. We've got, it goes back to that professor I had as an undergraduate. We've got to believe that these kids can handle the choice, that they will use it wisely if they've been taught to do so, and that if something's falling apart in terms of management or whatever, we pull the gang together and we say, "Hey,
What's
we've got a
going on?
problem.
Yeah.
Let's solve
Yeah,
this." Right?
there's so much trust that goes into this, and
It
when I
really
think
is.
of trust and autonomy, I think of it's not just us trusting the children, it's every layer of the school system trusting that we can make decisions for our children,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
the
Absolutely.
administration needs to trust teachers that I don't need to
Yeah.
have guided reading group 1, 2, 3 on my schedule because that is not going to meet their needs necessarily that day,
No.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've made, I watch the guided reading groups sometimes, and teachers interacting with one child while the other three kind of
Totally
cool their
disengaged.
heels. It's like have a conference if that's how it's going to work for
Yeah.
you, right? Because those kids should be reading and writing during that time.
Indeed, indeed. And so, okay, we're talking trust. I cannot trust a fellow teacher unless they're well planned. What I've realized, especially over the last few years,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
is if I don't have a long term vision or my colleague doesn't have a long-term vision for where we're going with a
Yeah.
particular unit of study per se, that
Yeah.
we're or question that we're cracking open with children inquiry wise,
Right.
and even some targets that we're going to hit along the way, then
Right.
I don't know if I'll be comfy trusting that that day to day will be as
No,
thoughtful.
it gets,
It's
yeah, no, this
messy.
is where we get
Yeah.
criticism, and criticism that's well-founded,
Yeah.
honestly, about it being too
Mhm.
loose, right? This is where, an understanding of the research comes in really
Yes.
handy, right? Because you know what matters most for kids, and you're gonna
Yeah.
prioritize that way. But if that's not you don't feel conversant with the research, then, that's why we have instructional
Yeah.
leaders, facilitators, coaches, people who do wonderful
Mhm.
webinars, people who, that's when we turn to instructional leadership, and or colleagues. But you're right. It's not, we're going to set the field back. We're going to set our school back, but we're also going to set the field back if we are, sort of not focused on the actual
Yeah.
learning that's happening. That's the point,
Yep.
right? And we've gotta know what matters most for kids in terms of literacy learning. That's gotta be really clear. I address that in, my book, To Understand,
Mhm.
um, now quite a while ago, but we've gotta know what's essential for children's learning. Sometimes it aligns with the standards, and honestly, sometimes it doesn't.
I
So
agree.
we've gotta have a really pretty fixed understanding of what matters most for kids, and then we design around that.
Yeah,
But it's a very different kind of planning.
it is.
I'm not, filling out 300, words of, for each part of the day. I've got this longer term
Yes.
vision, out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, five
Mhm.
weeks, and I know where we're headed. There's a couple of my client districts have done some great work with curriculum. This very much around an integrated reading and writing model. So it's been fun to watch that.
Yeah, and so you use the planning wheel that I'm going to have you
Yeah.
describe. And again, I feel comfy in my day to day being fluid and flexible, those invitational groups not being planned, if I have a long term plan in place.
Yes.
And this planning wheel, I've lived it now with Sam Bennett coaching me and using it.
Yep.
Lucky
Yep.
me. And
Yep.
I'm a linear.
Who was the originator with Debbie
Right,
Miller?
right,
Yeah.
and so I'm a linear gal, and that's what's fascinating. So I sketch the whole my plan out on a wheel, but then I actually type it up for myself with a
Yeah.
linear.
Yeah.
So I think it's just your preference. But
It
to
is.
talk to
Yeah.
listeners, what is the planning wheel that you include in your book?
Well, this is just genius, and honestly, I didn't ever use the planning wheel in my own
Mm,
in my own classroom because we were still filling out squares that our principal
yes,
checked every, Monday. I mean, it was awful. It was very linear, very tiny square.
yes,
I mean, it just didn't work for me at all. I ended up doing most of the planning with the kids on chart paper. And then I'd say when Charlie came in, "There it is. There's the plan." He said, "Well, that doesn't fit in a
no,
box, does it?" It
no,
didn't. But now the wheel was sort of what I was needing all along.
mhm,
And I love the wheel because, as Debbie Miller describes it, you can enter that wheel any place. You can start with a large group crafting session. You can start with reflecting. You can start with composing, which is the independent reading and writing time. So it symbolizes, that wheel just symbolizes the flexibility that we
yeah,
have. That said, in the under the crafting section, sort of section of that wheel, I'm going to put, what resources am I going to use? Am I going to write on the dot cam? Am I going to use this, or this book? What's my sort of overall
Yeah.
focus for this lesson? So it's all right there, sketched out pretty well. You can see the resources on
Mm.
Heinemann's website for this. You can see how quickly I sketch these
Yeah.
out. I've put a bunch of finished lessons in there. And it's just, it's enough of a guide for me that I don't lose that focus. I have a problem. My name is Ellen Keenan. I have a time problem with kids. I'm with them, whole class, small group, doesn't matter. I want to stay
I
with them.
know.
And if they bring up interesting things, I'm likely to follow them. And pretty soon I've got 15 minutes behind
Yeah.
me and
Gone.
we haven't gotten to independent reading writing. This is a problem I worked on my entire career. It's just too much fun to be with kids. But the bottom line is they need time to read and write. And so the wheel has really helped me with my time issues. I'm in classrooms every week of the school year. So this is an ongoing active practice for me. And that getting that time issue under control has been a huge part of my late
Yeah.
career work. I'm still not there.
I vibe with you because I adore children and I linger. It's what is it? Cut the cord, like walk away, let them do the work, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like the messages I'm giving them. Like, "You can't think
Yeah.
independently or do things without me." I don't I don't love that message at
Yeah.
all. So, it's very much I'm still trying to figure this
Mhm.
out, and I am, 108 years into my career, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. So,
Well, the planning wheel I know has helped me tremendously. Just that visual of the circle of carving and always starting with what the students will be doing first
yes.
and
Yeah.
ensuring,
Start on the composing
start
side,
start in the
yes.
composing, which seems like, wait a
Yep,
second, I'm not starting with the crafting. No, start with the composing, make sure that's
yeah,
2/3 of the minutes of that pie. And then
exactly.
okay, if I can trust that, yes, I can confer, I can pull invitational groups during that 2/3, but the children will be composing during that time.
Yeah,
All right, cool.
they are
They're
working. Yep,
working. And
yep,
you say, be patient with yourself, be patient with your students, grow that time slowly. So if I need to
yep,
tuck some catches in, I can do that.
yeah,
But
yep.
making sure that I only own 1/3 of that pie for instruction,
Exactly.
then I feel better about that.
Yeah, exactly. And it probably goes without saying that there is one circle for reading and writing,
Yes.
not one circle for reading and another one for
Yeah.
writing. So it's kind of changing our
Mhm.
mindset about planning. It's, I have to think of the outcome for reading and then the outcome for
Yeah.
writing. Even the way the Common Core state standards are set up, there's there's a lot of
Yeah.
overlap. And so, there are problems with this Common Core, but there are some strengths
Mhm.
too. And one of them is sort of the way to look at, okay, I've got reading in, informational text, and I've got writing in informational text. Where do these standards come
Yes.
together? You know, work through them in, sort of a chronological order. What comes together and how does it fit my overall objectives for this
Yeah.
unit?
And I think too, like just to clarify again, the literacy studio is not a curricula. It's a
No.
structure. And I think that's a
Yes.
huge
Yes.
part of confusion that still exists when we even say the word workshop. Workshop is not
Yes.
curriculum, right?
No, no, no,
No,
no,
no,
no,
no.
no, no. It's an instructional
It
framework.
is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so the beautiful thing about Literacy Studio as an instructional framework is that you really
Yeah.
do reach all children in this model. And yet we as adults have biases that we need to examine. And
Yes.
I'm just going to put it out there. And I think that I've learned from some of the best of how to study my biases that I didn't even know that I had.
Yep.
But what would you say are some essential elements of self examination that we could try?
Absolutely. I can tell you just, I think there are a lot of ways into this question, and it's maybe the most important question of
Hmm.
all. That because it governs so much, our biases drive so much of our decision making with kids, and that's a little scary. my for me, I got together with a group of very, very trusted
Mhm,
colleagues, and we read some very challenging books. Um, this is one of them.
mhm.
For example, if you have not read this, and there are my sticky notes all over
Yeah.
it, but we started to examine biases that have to do with
Mhm.
race. We examined biases that have to do with our beliefs about what children can and can't do at different
Yeah.
ages. It was, and you probably know this group. It's Steph
Mhm.
Harvey, Ann Goodvis, Debbie Miller, Chris Devani, and
Yeah.
me. And throughout COVID, we took a deep dive, and we were able to share, because there's so much trust in that
Mhm.
group. We were able to share things that we had uncovered as biases in ourselves, and really think through how is that affecting the teachers and children with whom we
Mhm.
work. And so we had to really unpack a lot of that. It had to be in a trusted group
Yes.
of people for me. And that's not saying it's right, that's right for
Mhm.
everybody, but we really dug in during COVID and met, every other week on, our little Zoom meetings, and just unpacked a lot of this, specifically with an eye to how our unrecognized biases affect the teachers with whom we work, and therefore the kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something that I thought was incredible. It's on page 25. And I've read this over and over. Talk about understanding principles and 10 ways to modify language to enhance understanding. And so I think so much about the way we interact with each other.
Mhm.
And Ellen, I'm actually using these in coaching and working with
Oh,
teachers.
good. Oh, that's
It's
fantastic.
amazing,
Yeah,
right?
good.
And so
Yeah.
the statement above the 10 points to enhance understanding when teaching or talking informally to students, we should. And you give a gorgeous outline, 10 points, vary the tone of our speech, speak in the quietest tone, vary the pace, intensity, expression of emotion. And you go on 10 different, but I think that this
Yeah.
speaks to grown-ups. Um, and
Oh, very definitely.
it's
Yeah.
brilliant. I love it.
Well, thank you. It came from, and now I can't even find my own darn book. Here it was. This is the principles are in
Yes.
this book, and we were, that I think it came out in 2011 or 12 or something. But it is. I found it really useful for working
Mhm.
with adults as well as kids, for
Yeah.
sure. But some of the ways that our habits, our patterns of speech, are really problematic for kids. And I had a great principal as an early career teacher who helped me recognize that by, videoing. He got
Yeah.
video from all of us on our teaching, and it was horrifying, honestly. Those patterns, I mean, I was loud,
Yeah.
I was fast.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was eating up all the airtime.
Yeah.
It was just cringeworthy, and, I learned a ton from that. That book came out of that experience in my own teaching. It was humbling, to say the least, Olivia. It was very humbling.
Yes, talk about understanding. And
Yeah.
I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Fabiola Bagula. She's the deputy superintendent of San Diego City School District, and
I
season
know,
2,
yeah.
episode 4. And I just
Fantastic.
re-released it, and she reminded me there's
Oh,
the
good.
Cognitive Bias Codex that outlines 180 different
Yeah,
biases that we have
yeah,
and that we wouldn't even recognize. And she said with her team and
yeah,
colleagues, they would pull up one of the different biases and talk about it and say, "Oh my gosh,"
yeah.
right?
Brilliant,
I thought
brilliant way to
it
attack it.
is, it
Yeah,
is.
yep.
So in the crafting, in the composing, reflecting, invitational groups, this structure is so accessible. I love
I
the
hope so.
brushes, the paints, the canvas analogy. I love to paint, and so that really struck a chord with me. Um,
Oh, do
yeah,
you?
I
I'm
do.
so
I
envious.
do.
Oh, I would love
I
to.
do. So I'd love for you, I'm working with teachers that have read the book. They are so excited to kick this off in the fall. What is our call to action? What would you
Yeah.
recommend as a starting point with the Literacy Studio?
Yep. Have your objective in mind. And I actually, in one of the chapters, I can't remember which one now, there's sort of a, if you're going to start
Yes.
here, step one, step two, step three. So it's very, very well laid out. But I think the have the bigger picture in mind. Your goal is integrating reading and writing. And I talked to the kids about it. I mean, that's where I started. Just talk. What do you guys think? I'd like to have reading and writing meet together. I'd like for us to be readers and writers at the same time. What can you tell me? Go to the kids every time, especially at the beginning of the year. You know, viewers or listeners are going to be listening to this and thinking about their early structures for the school year. Talk to the kids. Know what your bigger goal
Mhm.
is. We're going to integrate reading and writing. We're going to do away with irrelevant
Yeah.
grouping based on levels. Those are your big picture things. We're going to use a planning wheel that integrates reading and writing necessarily, and then ask them.
Yeah.
Take a look at the standards for sure. They don't know that. And then ask them, how would this work together for us? Not instead of saying, from 9 to 9:45 we'll have, you know,
Yeah.
reading. It's just we've got to loop them in. When we were talking about issues with children in their social and emotional
Mhm.
world, I think so much of it could be addressed. So much of it could be addressed through more choice
Yes.
for
Yes.
kids. They have more choice. They don't have to fight us for control,
Yeah.
right? And I cannot even I can't count on one hand, Olivia, the number of times kids have disappointed me in my very long career. They just don't
No.
disappoint. You give them the choice, you give them the time, you give them the response, they don't
No.
disappoint. It's wildly consistent.
Yeah.
But we've got to take that first leap to say this is going to feel like letting go a little bit of control. And that's one of our hardest, it certainly was for me, one of our hardest, most sort of complex challenges, I think.
Yeah, I would say so too. And I think trusting that all kids can and that they will rise to the challenge if they feel like we're all in this together. Um, I want I want
Absolutely.
listeners to be able to get in touch with you. You have a gorgeous
Oh, yeah.
website. And what is the best way for listeners to connect with you?
Oh my gosh. I just would love to interact with people about this because I love to hear what the problems are in implementation. So here are two ways. My website is mosaicliteracy, one word, .com. So easy, easy there. And then, or just my email, first and last name, Ellen Keene. My Ellen is spelled weirdly, ELLINKEENE, the numeral one at Gmail.
Perfect.
Just shoot an email to me.
Awesome.
When I'm traveling during the school year, I can always answer an email at 35,000 feet in the air, right? So I'm happy, happy to do that and love hearing from people. I think sometimes people get a little worried that, oh, she's busy. Hey, we're all
Yeah,
busy. I mean, come on, I'm no busier than anybody else. I'm just in the air
I
more.
love it. Yeah.
So be in touch, absolutely. And I love hearing from folks, especially if you're reading the book as a school group.
Mhm.
I've got two sessions later this week where I'm meeting with school-based book studies.
Wonderful.
So it's really fun for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, so I feel compelled to end our conversation with a gorgeous quote from your book. Leave listeners ready to buy the book, jump in, and it makes so much sense, Ellen. So here we go. This is one of my favorite quotes from the whole book, actually.
Aw.
We can build on the tremendous successes of workshop teaching, arguably one of the most significant pedagogical changes in American public schooling, and welcome students into 21st century learning. Brilliant educators around the world have refined and reimagined both readers and writers' workshops, and we continue to learn and rethink. Literacy Studio is the product of that rethinking, so let's dive in. Let's do it.
Well, thank you. See, I don't even remember what I wrote, but, it's that if I wrote that, okay, well, I believe
You
you.
did. You did.
I don't have any recollection of it, but now you can't miss this puppy
I
dog
know.
sitting on my chair back
What
there.
a
That's the
doll.
chair where I'm supposed to sit, Olivia, but I think we have Charlie. His name is Charles Dickens.
Yes.
Emphasis on the Dickens. stretched out real nicely on my chair
He's
back
loved
there.
this
So
conversation as much as I
if your
have.
viewers are watching and wonder what the heck that is, that'd be Charles Dickens
Yes.
right there. Oh, there he
There he
goes. He's
goes.
going to show his.
And
Yep,
his
very
sibling
handsome.
Maggie is close by, snoozing down
His
below.
sibling Maggie is far more well behaved, and her name is Margaret Atwood, by the
Oh,
way. So
so
they're
lovely.
always named. Yep, they're named after our favorite authors in this
Love
house.
it, love
So,
it.
but there's Charlie, right in my
I
camera.
love it. Ah! Well, Ellen, you have been an inspiration for so many
Oh,
of us
thank
as
you, Olivia.
educators all over the world, and this has been a gift of conversation. Um, I can't wait to embrace the Literacy Studio moving forward with every school district I
Yay!
work with and support teachers along the way. Thank you for making yourself so accessible.
Oh,
And
you're so welcome,
yeah,
Olivia. What beautiful questions you've crafted, and it sort of took us into a fairly deep level in a relatively short period of time. So I'm very grateful for your skill as a colleague to throw out those questions. I appreciate it
thank you.
a lot.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Take
Yep.
care.
Yeah. You as well.
Scholutions is a podcast created, produced, and edited by me, Olivia Wall. Special thanks to my guest, Ellen Oliver Keene. Also, a big thank you to my older son, Benjamin, who created the music that's playing in the background. I would love for you to share the podcast far and wide, leave a review, subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Scholutions Podcast. If you'd like to become a Scholutions sponsor or share episode ideas, leave me a SpeakPipe voice memo at my website, oliviawall.com/podcast, or connect via email at scholutionspodcast@gmail.com. Please keep listening. Let's continue finding inspiration together.